It's great to be in the SEC. Welcome back to another episode of the SEC Recap Podcast, coming to you on Sunday evening-ish here. Just had a little bit of extra time. I wanted to squeeze in an extra episode today, just because we are wrapping up Week 9. So I wanted to take a look at the Week 9 recap, get an early jump on the power rankings as we head into Week 10, and then go ahead and look at latest AP rankings, because very, very soon we will have those college football playoff first rankings coming out in about a week or so. And then kind of look at the state of the SEC, the SEC East, the SEC West, see how these conference or these division races are shaping up. And then we'll save the Week 10 picks and previews for a later episode this week. That way I can kind of squeeze everything in and not be running over like that hour range. I like to keep everything, 45 minutes or less, ideally in that 30-minute range. So if you're listening in audio form, wherever you prefer to check your podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify, all those places, thank you so much. But why don't you head on over to YouTube and join the rest of us, because I'll have some visuals, some screen grabs up here on screen, just super helpful to look at. Everything will be linked in the description as well. But while you're over on YouTube, smash that thumbs up, like, subscribe, share with your friends. I appreciate you guys. YouTube has been really, really good to me. It was in the first year of this podcast, and it continues to be. So grateful, definitely appreciative of you all. All right, let's jump into it. Let me hide my tickers here. All right, so Week 9 recap. These are not exactly in order. I'm actually going to start with, excuse me, need a sip of beer here. It's better. I'm going to start with the South Carolina A&M game. Gamecocks had to travel to College Field. They were 14.5-point dogs. Again, these are the lines at the time that I made this and recorded last week's podcast. So if you were looking at different numbers, understand. This is what I was looking at when I made these. So Gamecocks really struggling, had fallen to 2-5 on the year, losses to Tennessee, loss to Florida, kind of a crushing loss, and then a loss on the road at Mizzou. Now, those aren't inherently bad losses, right? Having to go on the road to play Tennessee. Tennessee was ranked, playing well at the time. Florida, I still think I'll make my case for Florida again. I've kind of beat this drum all year. I've tweeted it several times. I think Florida still ends up 6-6, but they playing as well as Florida has at any point in the season. And it took a come from behind there in the fourth quarter to beat them in Willie B's over in Columbia SC. And then, of course, having to go on the road to the other Columbia, Como, there in smack middle of nowhere, central Missouri, and play a Missouri team who's, arguably as hot as anybody right now, playing really, really well offensively. Defensively, they're, but that offensive efficiency, very, very good over there for the Mizzou Tigers. So it kind of been an uphill battle here for the Gamecocks in the last half of the season. They really needed this one in their fight to get to bowl eligibility. Still technically possible, though not likely. They fall to the Aggies. Let me see. It was 30-17. So South Carolina goes to 1-5 in conference, 2-6 overall. Texas A&M, meanwhile, improves 5-3 overall, 3-2 in the SEC. So Texas A&M, not a bad team, and I don't know that there was any reasonable expectation that South Carolina would win this game. Texas A&M was the heavy betting favorite, as you can see. So pick for them was to win outright. South Carolina to cover. Got both of those. It was a 13-point loss. Didn't hit on the over, but if you got, two of those three, you did really, really well. We'll dive more into the standings and kind of how, what the future holds for each of these squads here in a later segment. Afternoon game, world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Number 1, Georgia technically it's a neutral site game, but at Florida. Florida was the home team for this one. I don't remember what the spread was. I want to say Georgia was like around 15 and a half, somewhere right there. Anyway, my pick was for Georgia to win outright. I also took the over 47 and a half. That was an easy dub. Georgia trounces Florida 43-20, and really 13 of Florida's points came late in the fourth quarter, kind of garbage time points. They really just had a touchdown in the first quarter. I think they took an early 7-0 lead on Georgia, and then it was all Georgia. Reading off the point totals for Georgia by quarter here: 10, 16, 10, and 7. So, you know, that's kind of where I expected it to be. I heard a lot of people saying that they expected it to be a close one. Florida playing well, but if you'd watched Florida play, they got blown out by Kentucky. They kind of just dink and dunk their way up and down the field. Those running backs are really good. Don't get me wrong. Graham Mertz is doing what he's been asked to do really well, but what's his average depth of target? It's not far. Like Florida's not really hitting you deep. They're just kind of doing enough to win the games that they're supposed to win. Like I said, I think that Tennessee win for them continues to be their best win, maybe their best win that they'll have all year. But that one goes as a dub for me on the record books. We'll get more into what the future holds for Georgia and Florida a little later on. Next game up, Mississippi State at Auburn. This is the battle for the bottom of the barrel, or the bottom of the barrel battle, whatever you want to spend this. I like Auburn, but they haven't been good. They just haven't had a lot of offense. Struggle for them to score. I think take another year or two for Hugh Freeze to really get that rolling the way that I think a lot of people expect him to. Some outsized expectations coming into this year. I think the narrative was, oh, Hugh Freeze will win one that he's not supposed to win, and it's really looking like most of those games that he could win, that he shouldn't win, have all but passed him by. I mean, they got Alabama coming up for the Iron Bowl, but is there any realistic expectation that this Auburn team is going to steal a win versus an Alabama team that has really just only gotten better and better? Yeah, I don't think so. So Mississippi State traveling down to the Plains to Jordan-Hare, 6.5 point. Auburn was a 6.5 point favorite. The over-under was 41.5. I said take Auburn to win outright and cover. And while you're there, take the under at 41.5. Auburn won 27-13. So it was an easy cover, and it was also an easy under on that point total. So that was a solid win. Next game up, we had Vanderbilt. Heavy road underdogs to number 12 Ole Miss. The easy pick here was obviously Ole Miss to win outright. I did think that Ole Miss would just score and score and score, and that Vandy would also score because they can put up some points. And for the Commodores to cover that 24.5, that did not happen. It just barely didn't happen. Ole Miss won 33-7. Vanderbilt falls to 0-5 in SEC. They don't have a conference win yet. 2-7 overall. Meanwhile, Ole Miss improves to 7-1 overall, 4-1 in the SEC. Looking really, really good. Ole Miss still has some tough games ahead of them. We'll get into that more later today and in the episode later this week. But that was a big miss for me. Didn't even come close to that over on the 63.5. But Ole Miss does win comfortably here. Now, last game, kind of the game of the week for me, is the beer barrel. And if you're not a Kentucky or Tennessee fan, then that really doesn't mean anything to you. But a lot of Kentucky fans and Tennessee fans want this game to be a trophy game again. It historically was. They played for an oak beer barrel that they would paint the scores on when they won. And so this game means a lot. It really means a lot to Kentucky, but Tennessee fans will downplay this. I am one. But this game really means a lot to Tennessee fans as well. They won't let you know that on Twitter. They'll try to pretend like it's Kentucky Super Bowl and Tennessee doesn't care. But we absolutely do care. Tennessee fans do care. These two schools hate each other. Kentucky really hates Tennessee. I think most importantly, they hate losing to Tennessee. Even in some of their best years in recent history, under Mark Stoops, they still have just not managed to get it done against some middle of the road or just straight out bad Tennessee teams. However, this game in Lexington, past few meetings, has been close. It's really been a one possession game. Let's go back to 2021 under Josh Heupel. It was a shootout between Will Levis and Hendon Hooker. They threw for like a bajillion yards. in that game, and it was just a touchdown fest, and Tennessee hung on like 45-42. Of course, the game last year in Knoxville was a blowout. It was a blackout for Tennessee and a blowout. But going back into Neyland, Tennessee not having the same offensive firepower that Vols have been kind of used to those first 2 years under Heupel. This was really a game. You could call this a coin flip game. Tennessee just a 3.5-point favorite on the road. Now, being a favorite on the road in the SEC, you're getting a lot of respect there for sure. Kentucky not ranked, Tennessee coming into this game at 21. But listen, the way this rivalry has gone, you just look at the matchup history, especially there in Lexington. You knew this was a game Kentucky could win. Kentucky fans definitely felt it was a game maybe they should have won in a lot of ways when you look at that in hindsight. But Tennessee does pull this one out. They took a lead. They actually never gave up the lead, although Kentucky did keep it close. I think it was as close as even 2 points. At one instance in the game, like 26-24. They miss a long field goal, which would have given them the lead. So, Tennessee basically got a big stop. And then in a really bizarre ending, and I would pull up the video of this, but it would just get pulled. It would get filtered out of Restream and YouTube here for copyright stuff. But at the end of the game, Tennessee is driving the field. They're up 33-27. And it's looking like they might have to go ahead and score, needing at least a field goal. So they're up 6, right? A field goal makes it a 2-possession game no matter what. Kentucky would have to drive the field, score, and then, get an onside kick and, at least kick a field goal to win the game. So Tennessee really, I think, looking to go up by 9. Charles Campbell had been rock solid. He was 4 for 4, including a long of 49. So Tennessee just leaning on that run game. It was all Dylan Sampson in the second half. Just chunking it up the field. Joe Milton with some really nice quarterback keeps and runs, stopping the clock, getting on the sideline. They milked almost, if not 4 minutes off that clock, which you rarely see a Josh Heupel offense do, right? It's quick yardage, big hit you big over the top, or a lightning fast 3 and out. They do a really good job managing the clock, driving the ball, staying penalty free on that last drive, which that had kind of burned them throughout this game. And so they're within field goal distance. Joe Milton runs quarterback power just to kind of keep the ball in the middle of the field, looking like Tennessee's going to set up the field goal. The field goal unit starts to come on. Charles Campbell is, lining up his kick, and a Kentucky defender we see is on the ground. And I went back and watched this, and this is why I wanted to pull it back up and kind of show it, but I know it would just get pulled here. It didn't look like the defender ever really fully got up off the ground. So on that Joe Milton keeper, number 9, I think, Silver, Keyshawn Silver. I might have his name wrong. I'm not looking at any stats right now. I'm just trying to go off the dome. I think it was number 9 for Kentucky. Just kind of got twisted up in the pile there and starts to stand up, but immediately just kind of drops back down to one knee. Like, he never really got all the way up. He went back to the ground really hard. So a lot of Tennessee fans were out there saying that he was faking an injury. I don't think the injury was serious. To me, it did not look like he was faking an injury there. Maybe he just knew, hey, like, if I stay on the ground, it stops the clock because we don't have any timeouts. That's definitely a possibility. But if you go back and watch the full play, you can see him try to get up and then immediately drop back to one knee like he really was hurt. So don't know exactly what was going on there injury-wise. Just kind of wanted to paint more of a picture for Kentucky and or Tennessee fans out there. Just because I don't like when players go down. I don't like flopping to stop the clock or to stop an up-tempo offense. I also don't like people like booing injured players when they actually might be injured. So I get it. It's something that have kind of plagued Josh Heupel offenses, especially Tennessee offenses. Tennessee fans hate it because there are a lot of fake injury flops out there, and there were some in this Tennessee game. However, there on that last play, that last drive, I do not think that was one. I may be proven wrong, though. We'll probably never know. However, that happened with about 44 seconds on the clock. So anytime there's a stoppage due to an injury, there's an automatic 10-second runoff. So there's a lot of players milling around on the field. It really looked like the players didn't really understand what was happening. Um, and so there's a 10-second runoff to drop the game clock to 34 seconds. Tennessee, of course, has 40 seconds on the play clock. So they didn't even have to kick the field goal. They just let the clock run out and the game was over. So it was a really underwhelming ending to kind of an awesome game. I mean, it was really back and forth. Kentucky, Tennessee, they were right there. A lot of us knew it was going to be close. I did take Tennessee to cover the 3.5. Just because when I see 3 and a hook, would they have maybe won by just a touchdown or a field goal? Yes, there were also a lot of points left on that field. I just had a feeling that it would come down to Tennessee's offense having to carry the defense this game. And they did. So Vols hang on, get the cover. We also hit the over at 51.5. But let me just say this. Devin Leary in that passing game came to life. Maybe it was just from Tennessee kind of bottling up Ray Davis in the run. Let me go back and just look at the box score stats here. Might as well just pull this up on screen to share with you all. If you're listening here, we're just waiting on the page to it's bad podcasting. But Devin Leary, 28 of 39, 2 touchdowns, 372 yards, 84.4 QBR. Really, really good. Ray Davis, though, 16 carries for 42 yards and a lone touchdown. Overall, Tennessee holds Kentucky to 72 rushing yards. So Kentucky had no choice but to get it done through the air. Vols, meanwhile, very, very balanced. And speaking of good, Joe Milton was very good. 18 of 21. That's a quarterback rating, QBR 85.6, 228 yards and a touchdown. He also adds 10 carries for 26 yards. And those were not just fluff yards. Those were critical. I mean, Joe Milton was picking up first downs with some of those yards. A Tennessee rushing attack, 253 yards altogether. Jalen Wright, a monster, 11 carries for 120 and a touchdown. Dylan Sampson, electric in the second half. 17 carries, 75 yards, and a tutty. And then through the air, like I said, Dante Thornton kind of coming to life. 3 receptions for 63. Squirrel White, 5 for 47. They were getting it done. They were utility yards. Chaz Nimrod with the long 39-yard bomb for a touchdown. Just Kentucky defender fell down, and Chaz Nimrod just wide open there in the end zone. Joe Milton, an easy lob to him for the score. So all around, just a great game, really exciting game. If you're Kentucky, of course, you hate it. If you're a Tennessee fan, though, you are loving it. And that's why I got this bad boy for you. This year's Beer Barrel apparel. I'll pull it up on screen here. The Beer Barrel Champs 2023 started this last year. Had a few buyers on it. Really, really appreciative. These are on my Bonfire store, bonfire.com/store/SEC recap. That link will be in the pod description if you're listening at home. Got it up on the screen here on YouTube. Got the QR code. You can just scan that. It'll take you right to it. Showing off the shirt here on the website. We got the Beer Barrel with the Beer Barrel Champs and the score 33-27 and the year at the bottom. Kind of reminiscent of how they used to paint that trophy. So while the admins, the powers that be, refuse currently to bring back the Beer Barrel, even though all the fans want it, you can commemorate the Beer Barrel trophy with this Beer Barrel apparel. Promo code FALL23 saves you 15% through November. Promo code FALL23 saves you 15%. And that's not just on the Beer Barrel apparel. That's any order on my site. Let me just show off my SEC Pride merch here. So we've got SEC Pride merch for every SEC team, t-shirts, long sleeve t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts. They're really, really awesome. Have had several buyers in the last couple of days. I know who you are. I'm not going to name your names because I don't know if you want to be shouted out on the podcast, but I appreciate you guys so, so much. I know this stuff isn't cheap, but it helps me out. I make just a few bucks, but in return, you get some really, really awesome looking team merchandise. Like I said, hoodies, sweatshirts, t-shirts, long sleeve t-shirts. Go check it out. The weather's cooling down. It's bonfire season. Head on over to bonfire.com/store/SEC recap and get your stuff today. All right, let's move on into the next segment. This is going to be power rankings coming out of week 9 into week 10. So I always put the range in there because sometimes if you say week 9 or week 10, it's like, are these after week 10, pre week 10? What are they? So in this in between period, week 9 to 10, this is how I see the SEC shaking out. And I'm going to also kind of reference, and I know a lot of people hate this, but ESPN's FPI, just when we look at, projected win losses and win out percentages and things like that, that we're going to get into a little bit more here today and this week. So, not a lot of shakeup from what I put out last week. Georgia's still number 1. Alabama's number 2. Ole Miss 3. LSU 4. You're going to be hard pressed to convince me to change up that order. And it looks like you just kind of take, the order that these teams appear in the AP rankings. Georgia, of course, number 1 overall in the latest rankings. Alabama's at number 8. Ole Miss is at number 11. LSU's at 13. But that's not it. These are neutral site matchups. So you factor into the record, but really what we're saying is how would these teams match up against everyone else on a neutral site? Not necessarily how they just, played on the road at whatever team they lost to or beat, right? So Mizzou was off this week. I had them at the 5 spot yesterday. I think they're still totally deserving of that 5 spot, but I moved Tennessee into that 5 spot just because they played. They played this week. They played Kentucky on the road, and they got an SEC road win. Was it a super impressive win? No, but we saw things out of Tennessee that we hadn't seen, and that was the offense carrying the defense. And to me, that shows a lot of growth. They had a big injury to their defense. Kamal Hadden lost him for the season, one of the best cornerbacks in the SEC. So I think they showed a lot of grit. They took away Ray Davis in the run game. They said, we know they're going to throw it on you. Like that was their game plan. And they did just enough defensively to let the offense hang in and carry them. So really liked what I saw from Tennessee. Listen, guys, we will see that matchup between Tennessee and Mizzou here in just a couple weeks. Mizzou's got a big matchup with Georgia first, though. They need to be worried about that. So do not worry about this 5 and 6 spot. That's all going to sort itself out here in a couple weeks. But heading into week 10, I've got no problem putting Tennessee at that 5 spot, Mizzou at 6. But like I said, they're right there together. Number 7, I got Texas A&M. Still think Texas A&M is good. They got the win at home over South Carolina. I think they are better than Florida, Kentucky, Auburn, kind of like that 7, 8, 9, 10 range. They've got some flaws, but I do think Missouri, Tennessee, obviously, because Tennessee beat them, LSU, Ole Miss, all those, obviously better than Texas A&M. Florida, what can you say? I'm not surprised that they lost. I'm not really like punishing them for losing to Georgia. It's a game that I expected them to lose and to lose big. But I've got them staying at 8. I've got Kentucky staying at 9, and I've got Auburn still sitting at 10. The only thing I changed this week was Tennessee and Mizzou. I mean, the bottom of the SEC here, 11 through 14, just pick your poison. Mississippi State, South Carolina, Arkansas, Vanderbilt. I mean, can you make a compelling argument that it should be any different? Let's look at the SEC standings here. In the East, you've got Georgia number 1, Mizzou at 2, Florida kind of 3. Florida's ahead of Tennessee right now because they have the head-to-head against Tennessee. And then behind them, you've got Kentucky, South Carolina at 1 and 5, and Vanderbilt at 0 and 5. Over in the West, you got Alabama 5 and 0 in conference. Ole Miss behind them 4 and 1, LSU 4 and 1. Ole Miss, of course, with the head-to-head over LSU. LSU, though, draws Alabama this week. So, again, we're going to see a lot of this shake itself out. Behind them, you have Texas A&M, and then you've got Auburn, Mississippi State, both at 1 and 4, and Arkansas at 0 and 5. So, I know a lot of people think Mississippi State may be the second worst team in the SEC to Vanderbilt. I think you have to put Arkansas down there. No conference wins. Let's see, who did they play coming up? Oh, they traveled to Florida in week 10. So yeah, we're gonna get into those lines here in just a bit. So winnable game for them, actually, I think, sneak peek. But it's gonna be tough. So there it is. Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU, Tennessee, Mizzou, A&M, bringing up the top half of the SEC and rounding out the bottom, Florida, Kentucky, Auburn, Mississippi State, South Carolina, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt. Now, here's how I gel that, guys. Let's look at ESPN's FPI here real quick. And I'll make this a little bigger. All right. So I've got it filtered just for SEC here. At the very top, you've got Alabama. ESPN likes Alabama just a little bit better than Georgia, probably based on strength of record. I'm not going to get into all that. I could do a whole episode on strength of record and like the win out percentage and all that stuff. But, Alabama still currently projected for like that 10-2, 11-1. They've got some tough games. They've got LSU coming to town in the regular season, but they got to, travel to Lexington to play Kentucky, although I think that's a game they'll be heavily favored in. And Georgia's clearly at that 12-0, 11-1 floor. That's just kind of where things stand. LSU, Ole Miss, both comfortably at that kind of 9-3 floor. It's looking like with, potentially 10-2 upside for Ole Miss at least. Not sure about LSU. They have a very low margin of error to get to 10-2. They would have to win out. And then behind Ole Miss, you have Tennessee, and ESPN has them projected at 8.8, 3.2. So that's realistically kind of a 9-3, presuming they beat Mizzou, Vandy, UConn, and then lose a home game to Georgia. Is 10-2 possible for Tennessee? Yes. Is it likely? No. That's why I think they kind of belong right in that 5 spot now, behind LSU, behind Ole Miss, because of what their ceiling is, because of who they have left to play on their schedule and how they might match up against the rest of these teams on a neutral site. So I think 8-4 is realistically the floor for Tennessee now, which is great. That's a lot better than a potential 7-5 floor, which a lot of people were calling for after the Alabama loss. Still got a tough game against Mizzou here in a couple weeks, but 9-3 definitely possible. ESPN likes the Aggies slightly ahead of Mizzou based on FPI, right? And a lot of that is just due to who Mizzou has played, guys. Like, I'm not gonna get into it, but I see it circulating on Twitter. What is Mizzou's best win? I mean, it's a currently unranked Kansas State team that it took a miracle 60-yard field goal to beat. That's your best win. If you want to be taken more seriously, or be given the respect, I guess, that a lot of fans think you deserve, you needed to beat LSU at home, and you didn't. Okay. Now you got to travel to play Georgia. Listen, if you beat Georgia, that'll silence the critics, right? It's simple. Beat Georgia and you change the narrative. But you didn't beat LSU. You're going to have a really tough road to hoe against Georgia. And then you got Tennessee coming to town. And could Mizzou beat Tennessee? Yes. I think ESPN will favor Tennessee over Mizzou. However, Mizzou might very well be the betting favorite. Vegas might like Mizzou a lot over Tennessee, depending on what they look like. But Tennessee's going to be coming into Como at 7-2 because they play UConn this week. And Mizzou plays Georgia. Okay. So you're going to have 2 7-2 teams playing each other there in Como to basically what I think will decide that second spot in the East, presuming that Georgia wins out this week. Okay. So Mizzou is at 9-3 potential. Okay. Like a loss to Georgia, a loss to Tennessee. They still have to play Florida. Okay. That's going to be a game. Don't just assume you're going to beat Florida, but I think I would pick Mizzou in Como to beat the Gators. But don't rule out a 4th loss in there if you're a Mizzou fan. Being in that 8-4 range, that's where your floor is. Guys, we're talking floor here, not most optimistic, you win out, what's your upside? Okay. And then kind of skipping through that middle, Auburn, Arkansas, Auburn's kind of at that 6-6 range. Arkansas is not getting to a bowl. They're just not. Florida, we can see, is right at that 6-6 range, which is where I've had them all year. Kentucky's really kind of looking at 6-6, maybe 7-5 if they can win one of these last 4. They're going to lose to Alabama. They got to win in Starkville. They got to win in Starkville this week. That's what it comes down to for Kentucky to get to 7-5. South Carolina's not making a bowl. They're not winning these last 4 games. If they do, I'll eat crow. But just looking the way that they've looked, they got a chance to win this week against Jacksonville State. Okay. But it's very unlikely. So we got, Arkansas probably not making a bowl. South Carolina probably not making a bowl. Mississippi State can get there. It's going to take a win over Kentucky this weekend. And then Vanderbilt's not making a bowl. So we got 3 of our SEC teams not making bowl games. You got, Mississippi State, Kentucky, Florida, Auburn kind of fighting still to get to bowl eligibility, that 6-6, maybe 7-5 range. Then, A&M, Tennessee, Mizzou, they're really fighting for that 8-4 floor with potential, 9-3, 10-2, moonshot upside. And Ole Miss, LSU, like are solid runners up to Alabama and Georgia. That's just kind of how it all shakes out right now. It's not my opinion. It's kind of just what the stats say. And when you look at, how tough it is for some of these teams to win out, like, guys, look at Georgia's win out percentage. You think it would be astronomically high? It's not. It's 20%. Alabama's is 25.5%. Okay. Tennessee actually with the second strongest percentage to win out. Second to South Carolina, but that's just because the worst of South Carolina's schedule is over. I'm talking about teams that are going to make a bowl, though. Tennessee had a 12.9% chance to win out. Okay. Mizzou's chance to win out, 0.7%, guys. 0.7%. That's not good. Florida's chance to win out, 0.3. Kentucky's chance to win out, 0.8. All right. It's just what the numbers say. It's just what the numbers say. All right. Georgia might not win out. They're definitely more likely to than Tennessee. Tennessee definitely more likely to win out than Florida, Mizzou, Kentucky, South Carolina, Vandy, right? Not South Carolina. So dive into this stuff, guys. Look at it. When you're trying to like look at power rankings and set power rankings, which is kind of tab back here. It's not just based on bias or like eye test. You're looking at what each team has done, yes, but you're also looking at like what is the potential for these teams to meet again, or for the ones who haven't met. Like, what do the odds say that one team is going to beat the other, or what are the upset chances? The numbers really kind of help paint the full picture. You can get a lot from just kind of looking and guessing and say, yeah, I think this team would beat that team, but just look at the numbers, guys. People a lot smarter than you and me figure this stuff out. And so all you got to do is kind of piggyback on what they do. All right. Enough of that. Let's get into real quick the AP rankings, and we'll kind of preview the week 10 lines. Not going to get into the matchups, going to save that for another episode. So latest AP rankings dropped today. Georgia stays at number 1. We basically still have 5 teams 8-0. And this is important because the CFP rankings are set to come out, here in like the next week or so. And there's a lot of early projections already coming out. Some people wanting to project Michigan at that overall number 1 spot. You're going to have a hard time convincing me to put Michigan over Georgia. Same with Ohio State. Are the pieces there? Sure. But I mean, it hasn't been proven on the field. I don't know that you can definitively say that. So, you've got Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State, Washington. I think if, I were the CFP and I were to rank the top 4, which is really the only 4 that matters this year, since it's still just the 14 playoff, it would be Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State. I can see the argument for Florida State. I might put Washington in there. They both had close wins where they've had to pull it out. Okay. Oregon is playing really well. You probably have Oregon, Texas, or Alabama there on the bubble. Texas with the head-to-head over Alabama, it would make sense for it to be Oregon, Texas. But then again, as we saw last year, Tennessee beat Alabama head-to-head. And who is ahead of Tennessee on the bubble? Alabama. So you never know what they're going to do. You always got to think Alabama's going to get the benefit of the doubt if they're in that 6 to 8 range. The CFP might just say, well, hey, they're there. We know they have the caliber and the pedigree to be there. So that's what it is. Behind them, you got Penn State and Oklahoma. Ole Miss is just outside that top 10. Now, in the CFP rankings, if you're not in the top 10, realistically, you don't have much of a shot of cracking that top 4 unless all hell breaks loose. Okay. Um, you need a lot of chaos to kind of come in and shake things up. So Ole Miss is sitting just outside that. Now, the CFP could have them at, you know, number 10. Oklahoma lost to Kansas. CFP might look at that and say, well, maybe Oklahoma should be out, Ole Miss should be in. But if we're just going off the AP rankings, that's what we're looking at. LSU is a little bit further outside at 13. They're of course 6-2 on the year, a strong 6-2, but 6-2 nonetheless, and that matters because their path to the SEC championship is just that much more slim. They have to beat Alabama, and then Alabama would, I think, have to lose again. I think. So LSU's margin of error is very, very slim. That's why, if Ole Miss, especially LSU, if they're sitting outside the top 10, it's very unlikely. Now, the only way they get in is if they beat Alabama, right? I think LSU beating Alabama this weekend in Tuscaloosa guarantees you're in the top 10, even at 6-2. Even at 6-2. But then you got Missouri sitting just outside that at 14 overall in the AP. Their highest ranking, I think, in a long time. 7-1. They're nowhere near the top 10. They're just not based on resume, strength of record, uh, strength of remaining schedule. Guys, Missouri is just not going to be in the top 10. They're not. They're not. Don't kid yourself. Barely beating LSU, or sorry, MTSU, Memphis, and scraping by an unranked Kansas State. Like that's not a good enough resume to get you in the top 10. It's not. Like, drop the act, okay? But if they beat Georgia this weekend, you're in the top 10. Okay. So Mizzou, one of the few teams that, like, you're not in now, but if you beat Georgia, if LSU beats Alabama, you're in the top 10. No questions asked. I think it's easy. That's an easy pick to me. Okay. So that is very much in their control. It's doable. But if you lose to Georgia, if LSU loses to Bama, uh, there's no way you're in. Okay. You're not making that top 10. Tennessee sitting at 19. Very, very little chance they're going to crack the top 10. Okay. They could end top 15, maybe, but they've got 2 losses on the year. To a Florida team that's probably going to finish 6-6. And to a number 8 Alabama team, okay, on the road in Tuscaloosa. Not bad. They got to play Mizzou on the road. They got to play Georgia at home, okay? And then they got Vandy. So, pick one of those games. You're still sitting at 9-3. I don't think a 9-3 team is cracking that top 10. There's just too many 7-1 teams. Like I said, not enough chaos to get you inside that top 10. Oh, look at that. My bad. Kansas State is ranked again in at the very end of the ranking. So apologies, Mizzou fans. You beat previously ranked 15 Kansas State, currently again ranked 25 Kansas State. So there you go. I apologize. I should have scrolled further down the page. Maybe I'll go back and edit this video and just tell you to fast forward. So what's the CFP going to see? What are they going to do? We don't know, but we also do know, right? So here's the games coming up in week 10. Let's just kind of look at what we could see, see where we can spot some chaos. I'll tab through on here. If you're listening at home, I'm just re-navigating. You can go ahead and fast forward a few seconds if you want to. Week 10. And we'll filter by SEC here. Okay. So looking at oh, sorry, that was week 11. Week 10, there we go. I was gonna say we should have lines. So UConn coming to play number 19 Tennessee. That line's at 34.5. I'm not interested in that at all. That game has no consequence. Tennessee should win that game. They should win that game big. They should be 7-2 when they roll up to Como in week 11. Now Texas A&M has to go to Ole Miss, now number 11 Ole Miss. Ole Miss, a 4.5-point favorite. That's a big game. Texas A&M defensively good enough to give you fits, good enough to cause you problems. Offensively, not good enough to win this game, I don't think. So, Ole Miss entering week 11 could be sitting there at 8-1, 5-1 in the SEC, cracking, if not in the top 10 in those first CFP rankings. A game that I'm really interested in, Arkansas going to Florida. Arkansas, not a single conference win yet. Florida playing okay. But Florida, a 5.5-point favorite at home. This is about as winnable a game that Arkansas is going to get on the rest of the schedule, I think. But it's definitely winnable for Florida. I think I'm going to pick Florida for this, but I wouldn't be surprised if this game is a little closer than people think. Over under a 49. Um, Arkansas really needs it. And for the people who keep criticizing me for calling Florida a 6-6 team, let's just do some math here, okay? So you get Arkansas. You're sitting at 5-3 now overall, right? You get Arkansas at home in week 10. You win that, you're bowl eligible, you're 6-3. Okay? Where do you go in week 11? At LSU. You gonna tell me right now Florida's gonna be favored on the road at LSU? Absolutely not. That's an L in my book as I'm looking at it right now. Okay. So that drops you to 6-4. Then you got to go on the road at Mizzou. Hot as anybody in the country now, right now. Number 14, Mizzou. Let's see what happens at Georgia this week. Let's see what happens versus Tennessee in week 11. But in week 12, if Mizzou's sitting there at 2 losses, potentially even 1 loss, and they're hosting the Gators at home, I think Mizzou's going to be the easy favorite in that game. Okay. You take an L there, that drops you to 6-5. Then you got the good old Florida State game to end the season. Now you get them at home. Florida State's the number 4 team in the country right now. They're undefeated. Probably going to be a CFP top 4 team when those rankings come out. You think you're winning that game? You think Florida's going to be favored in that game? Absolutely not. That's an L as it stands. That's 6-6. Okay. So that's how I get Florida going to 6-6, right? So they got to win Arkansas to get there. Because I think if Florida loses to Arkansas in this game, you're not making a bowl game. At LSU, at MSU, then FSU. No, sir. All right. Jacksonville State, the Gamecocks, going to Columbia, South Carolina to play the Gamecocks. South Carolina, a home 14-point favorite. Jacksonville State, pretty good, man. 7-2. South Carolina, 2-6. Now, Jacksonville State's in a different league, right? This is the SEC we're talking about, but South Carolina banged up, dude. Banged the F up. Rich Rodriguez has his guys playing. Don't be surprised if this is a little bit of a game, but I do think this is a game that South Carolina should win and have to win. However, they're going to have to win a lot more than this one if they want to get bowl eligible. The 2:30 CBS game. 14 Mizzou at number 1 Georgia. Probably going to be the game of the day for a lot of people outside of LSU, Alabama. I mean, I think in that afternoon time slot, are you watching anything else but Mizzou, Georgia? I don't think so. Will Georgia do the same thing to Mizzou that they did to Kentucky? Probably. I mean, I think so. Georgia 16-point favorites at home, over under 55.5. Sorry. I mean, sneak peek. I think Georgia's going to be fine in that game. Auburn going to Vanderbilt. Auburn's a 13-point favorite. That one's kind of interesting to me. But again, all eyes are going to be on Mizzou, Georgia. Kentucky at Mississippi State, 3-point favorite on the road. They have not beat Mississippi State in Starkville since 2008. Over under a 46. They've got to get that one if they want to get to a bowl game and possibly even get to 7-5. Could be a close one, though. That one's really intriguing. But in that 6:30 to 7 time slot, all eyes are going to be on number 13 LSU at number 8 Alabama. Alabama just a 4-point home favorite. Vegas thinking LSU's going to score and Alabama's going to have to chase the points. We're thinking probably 2022 Alabama at Tennessee in Neyland shootout, that 52-49. Goodness. Ooh, I hope we get something like that. That would be awesome. Over under of 60. Oh, that's going to be a great game. That's going to be an awesome way to cap it off. Guys, I will preview all of those matchups for you later this week. I have hit the 45-minute mark, so I've got to get out of here. Don't forget to head on over to my store, Kentucky fans, Tennessee fans, Vandy fans, A&M fans. I've got merch for all of you guys over there, SEC Pride merch. It looks awesome. Thanks to all of you who've bought some this week. Bonfire.com/store/SEC recap. If you love my content, don't forget you can donate to the pod. Links are in the description below. I've got my QR code up here on the screen. Guys, thank you so much for listening. While you're here on YouTube, like, subscribe. Head on over to your favorite podcast platform, Google, Apple, Amazon, Spotify. Subscribe to the pod there. It helps me out. I appreciate you. Can't say enough. I'll be back later in the week to preview all those games. I'm going to get you out of here. I'm going to go have myself a good night and cap it off with some NFL. Have a great week. Looking forward to it. Peace.